Now, the Dream of the Rood is a particularly interesting poem for a number of reasons. Really, in some ways, it's kind of amazingly sophisticated from a contemporary perspective, considering how old the poem really is. Now, one of the things that we have to say from the onset is that the Dream of the Rood is, of course, a dream vision. And so, of course, in that way, it participates not just in the cult of the cross because it's a poem about the cross, but also because it evokes the dream vision of Constantine, which is one of the archetypal generic styles of the Middle Ages, and so is of course intimately related with the cult of the cross. Now, in addition, it also participates in prosotopoeia, which is to say a tradition of talking objects, which is very popular during the Anglo-Saxon period. We have some riddles, for example, that are from the perspective of objects. Now, the cross tells the dreamer about Christ's passion. So we get this first person account of the crucifixion, but of course from from the means of Christ's passion rather than through Christ himself. By doing this, the poet is really very sophisticated in that this poem personalizes the abstraction of divine suffering. One of the things about pain is we always have to use similes, really, to try to describe our own pain. It's intensely isolating in the sense that the pain I feel, you can't feel with me. You can empathize with me to a certain extent. You can certainly sympathize, but I'll tell you, it's like a red hot nail is being driven into my foot. I fall back onto these kinds of abstractions to try to give you some idea of what I'm talking about. And in the same way, the poet uses these sorts of images to try to get at the heart of the suffering of Christ. But because it's the Rood talking, and the Rood talks about this pain in the first person, in some ways it personalizes it in a way that allows us to really enter into an imaginative context where we believe we can approach the suffering of Christ. And this actually speaks to a very modern conception of pain. Melzack and Wall wrote kind of this seminal book in the late 20th century called The Paradox of Pain. And they also, that's kind of a popular book, but they also wrote a medical textbook on pain that certainly 10 or 20 years ago was still widely used. And it really draws upon this idea that pain is something we all feel, right? We all understand it. And so it's universal in that sense, yet it's intensely isolating in the moment. No one else can share my pain at the moment that I'm feeling it, even though they may have felt pain that is similar to it. Thus, the poet uses this paradox of something that's both universal and yet highly individual to elevate the cross into this symbol of not just the specific and isolated pain of Christ, but the symbol of the universal nature and hence the transcendence of this pain to the rest of us. I'm sorry that slides cut off at the bottom. The last bullet point says the poet uses paradox to elevate cross as symbol of universal transcendence. Universal transcendence are the meanings or are the words that are missing there. But in any case, in this sense, the Dream of the Rood is really it's intellectually brilliant in that it takes this conundrum, this paradox of the fact that pain is both intensely isolating and yet is a universal experience, and then takes this specific example of pain, the pain of Christ, and by extension, the shared experience of the cross, and so uses it as a symbol to give us a sense of how important this is and how transcendent not just the experience of pain is, but this particular pain of Christ, which then offers to humanity salvation. So it's really brilliantly done. And the fact that it's a voice within the poem talking to a voice of a dreamer that then evokes this idea of the dream vision, this generic concept of the dream vision, which takes us all the way back to Constantine and the dream vision that was really a touchstone for for the medieval world, and the fact that then Constantine's mother is said to have found a true cross. All of this is brought together brilliantly in this poem.